Good morning, J1s, and welcome to your lecture on writing to be read online, your first video lecture. I'm Jude Mathurine, and I'll be taking you through this class. Last term, we finished off by looking at blogging, and an essential part of blogging is knowing how to write online. So one of the things that this course will do, and this section is meant to do, is meant to give you the skills to write your blogs better. Let's begin. Okay, so for this section of the course, there is some required reading. You have to do the reading, obviously, also because you're off campus. It's really important. You don't have face-to-face contact. We can't cover everything, so it's really important that you look at the following readings. Mark Briggs has a chapter in this book, which is on Blackboard, called How to Report News for the Web. Then also on Blackboard are 4 readings, very important, because online reporting and online writing is pretty much where you're going to spend the rest of your careers as content begins to navigate and port from traditional radio and TV and print online. And you also need to know how to write for both platforms. All right, so the 4 readings are how we read online, 8 common mistakes when writing for the web, tips for tagging, which is really important, a content strategy for mnemonic journalists, and headline writing needs to work out of context. One will teach you how to write tags at the end of your story. One will teach you how to write headlines. One will teach you how people read online. And the really important one, which is the one that I work from, is the 8 Common Mistakes by Paul Bradshaw. Okay, now what's really important here is if you're sitting here just watching this video, grab a notepad and pen. Pause the video, take notes. Don't just watch it and assume that learning has taken place. Learning does not take place via osmosis. We remember more what we write down. And all of this stuff is really important for the future of your career. The next thing is sometimes you might have some questions, so I'm encouraging students, if they have any questions during this period, to send those questions to me via Twitter using the #Journ1 hashtag. And just remember, don't rely on the video to remember key facts for you. It's not going to help you in your test. It's not going to help you if you're given a assignment that is has deadline pressure, which you've got to write and finish constructing. So the outcome of this particular lesson is that you'll learn to improve online readability, legibility, traffic, and attention when writing editorial copy for online audiences. Right, so what is this? This is Paul Bradshaw's News Diamond, and if you follow blogs, it's really worthwhile following Paul Bradshaw's. That Paul Bradshaw runs the online and mobile journalism course at a university in the United Kingdom. And is an expert in this field. So what I've done is I've adapted Paul Bradshaw's News Diamonds to show you how we are engaging journalism in a bit of a different way. Between short and long, between speed and depth, and between telling the user what to do and giving the user degrees of interactivity so they can decide what to do. So right at the top of the diamond we get the alert. With the alert, people will get news in the form of an SMS, maybe a WhatsApp message, and maybe a tweet. The next phase down, which is a bit longer, is the draft. The draft pieces will probably be between 100 words maybe. And those are like the breaking news messages that you might get on a breaking news blog or maybe on a Facebook update that you need to know how to write. The next one down is what we're focusing on, which is the web article, online news web article. And those pieces are usually between up to 300 to 400 words. Then next down is analysis and reflection. Now, the blogs that you're writing aren't necessarily deep analysis and reflection, but you'll find that they're slightly longer. They need to be informed by rational substance and facts, and you will also have to engage in a certain amount of reflection and opinion writing in it, such reflection. Then as we descend now into reader control, we get more long-form editorial. Those are the longer in-depth stories and articles, the narrative journalism pieces, and the analyses that we see on websites like Slate and Daily Maverick. The next layer down on that is interactivity. Now, as we begin to use data journalism tools for the creation of website content, from graphics to maps to polls, we can add levels of interactivity and visualization so that our stories become more interactive and useful. And then finally, customization, which is where we will be able to be journalism developers, where we develop our applications and content where readers can choose their own path and have the ultimate amount of reader control. So if you look at the top of the diamond, alert, draft, article, package, and analysis, what we've actually covered in the first year of the class, or plan to cover, is just that. All right? How to write a tweet, how to identify breaking news and write a strong lead, how to write a good web article, and how to write analysis and reflection in the form of a good blog. So this slide tells you a bit more based on the Reuters approach to breaking news. First of all, you get the alert, which might be on WhatsApp, might be on SMS. It's short, it's 100 characters. It tells people that news is happening. How do you write in such a way that we are understood, though? This is what J-tweeting was all about. Do you know how to J-tweet properly? Many students still don't. Then the news break or rush, which is up to 100 words. That's the draft form of news. Can you write a strong news lead that captures what the story is about, that captures the 5 W's and H, and tells a person to wait for more? And next is the article or package. Up to 300 words, some people go up to 400, but these days it's between 300 and 400 words. Maximum of 3 to 5 paragraphs, which tells the person what the story is, doesn't have a lot of context. Then you have analysis and reflection. We've mentioned the blog, which can be longer, between 400 to 800 words. These are the stories with a great amount of context, facts, multiple sources, and also analysis. And this is the idea in this course, and the course is on journalism and online journalism, that you'll be able to competently and ably write in all of those elements as we move from speed to depth. That one, this page, and this page. What is the difference between this, which contains video and a map, and even allows you to add your street address so you can get customized content? What's the difference in this and that, and print? Think about what you're seeing. Think about what online is capable of. So what is the difference? The answer is quite a bit, and also not much. The fact is that even because we're doing things online doesn't mean that the world has changed. We still must gather the facts, verify them, gather from multiple sources, find the documents, find the evidence, and distill this content into a readable narrative that people understand, that tells people what happened, and provides them the context for why it's happened. So, what is the difference between print and online? The answer is quite a bit and not much. But there's another reason why the difference between print and online is quite a bit and not much, as you'll discover. That reason is related to the fact that some news organizations don't do much between their printed copy and their online copy. That is, if you picked up a copy of a newspaper and looked at the copy, and if you looked at copy on the website, the copy is pretty much the same. We'll get back to that point in a moment. So there's great potential for online journalism as a consequence of the characteristics and criteria for new media that we described in our first lesson. New media is hypertextual, it's real-time, it's multimedia, it can be interactive, content can be dialogic, content can be transactional, we can consume it whenever we like. But what are news organizations doing about this potential? What is some of the potential? First of all, print is limited by space. You only have a certain amount of pages in a newspaper. You only have a certain amount of words that you're allowed in a particular story. You can only fit so many pictures on a particular page. But digital is limitless. So there's possibility to take a story that was 300 words and run a story for 600 words online. There's a possibility to take a story that only had one photo or no photos and have 10 or 20 photos online. So print is limited by space, the news hole, the space where the content needs to fit into the newspaper. Whereas online, that content is limitless. The web structure also allows blips, short-form content like tweets, more easily than printed content. The web allows hyperlinking. Hyperlinking isn't just a nice to have. Hyperlinks allow stories to be given depth and to add variety and to demonstrate and show where your sources are, where they've come from. Online journalism will also permit comments and feedback in the form of comments on pages that still have them and papers that still have them, ratings for stories, allowing people to tweet stories or share stories in social networks or like it or email it. And this shifts the level of interactivity that a person is able to have with something static like a TV news bulletin or a print news story, and shifts the approach from broadcast, one to many, to network communication, many to many, and allows us to move from monologic communication, where we kind of just lecture like I'm doing now, to dialogic communication where we can actually have conversation. Okay, this is what Darren Gilmore speaks about. Online journalism also gives us the ability, once people start using the content, to mine the content. In other words, to see what people are doing, what people are reading, how long are people spending on content, what are they commenting on, what are they liking, what aren't they liking. And this allows us to help determine our editorial agenda. Our editorial agenda will be determined by some of the feedback that we receive from our websites, from our applications, from our mobile websites, about what people are talking about, what people like, and it'll influence things like what your editors might say you need to go out and cover for the news that day. As on that page that you just took a look at when we were thinking about what the difference is between print and online journalism, you'll also note that online media can include multimedia and interactive content. Videos are now de rigueur on our websites these days, as are galleries, as is live video, as are polls, as are maps. We use podcasts less often, but there's a greater range of potential interactive and multimedia content that is possible. Also, in relation to the idea of the people formerly known as the audience, the people formerly known as the audience also produce content which they regard as news and share it. This UGC, or user-generated content, from Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube are now finding their ways into news stories, whether on radio or on television. Recently, I was listening to a radio news show, and one of the video clips of a child being beaten by a teacher was played out on radio as part of the news insert. Now, while the ethics of that can potentially be debated, what that content started out, that video started out as, was UGC, user-generated content produced in someone else's phone that is now being used within a journalistic context to inform people about the abuse that some teachers in KwaZulu-Natal are meting out on their students. So the potential is also there to use aggregation and curation of strategies and approaches for user-generated content to augment, to help, to bolster your existing journalistic content and stories. And of course, we can also live publish and live stream tools like Facebook Live, and YouTube also permits live streaming, and Snapchat. And Instagram has Instagram stories, and everyone is able these days, as bandwidth has increased, to allow us to do additional live streaming. And so even websites that might be a newsletter or a pamphlet or a newspaper can now have the same kind of direct video content and effect that a traditional television broadcast would have. I want you to think about the news ecosystem of yesteryear as compared to the news ecosystem of today. In the news ecosystem of yesteryear, content was pushed to you. It was one to many. A group of people sat around and decided what was news. Then that news was published, or it was pushed to you. When you're online and you search for information, you're searching actively for a news story. For example, on the CPT Vice Chancellor and his salary. When you actively search for something, you are pulling information to yourself. And finally, when you are on Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter, and news and information reaches you because someone shared it and said, you might find this interesting, they are passing information to you. Previously, the old generation of news, traditional news and media, was only push media. There was no pull media, request on demand. And past media, sharing that content was very, very difficult, unless you wanted to share tapes or CDs or videos. Nowadays, online therefore allows us to do push, pull, and pass, and has changed up the way the information ecosystem works. Meaning that we need to consider how our content is distributed and reaches our audiences on the legacy medium, that is a newspaper, such as the Cape Argus, a radio station, such as Talk 702, or a television station, such as ENCA. Those are legacy media. But then, of course, those legacy media also have websites, and they also have social media channels to speak to their audiences, or at least a lot of them just share content with their audiences without speaking to them. Then they will also have a mobile website, because most of our content these days is accessed by people using their mobile devices. And finally, they might have a tablet edition or app. And that list of tools and devices is growing and growing, but content will still be moved around through push, pull, or pass. So what we've seen is there's great potential for online journalism. There's potential to exploit the limitless news hole. There's potential for hypertextuality. There's a potential for multimediality and interactivity. there's potential for real time, there's potential for transactionality. But the reality is that when we look at most websites, the stories that we see are often the same as print. Same story appears, there's very little to no change to it, and the assumption of the person writing it must be that the same person who didn't buy the newspaper will like the story online in the same format. Well, the fact is that online is not print, and we need to take into cognizance a very important thing. How do users use these tools for gathering and reading and watching information? We need to know the audience. Okay? Know your audience is an important maxim in journalism, and so the reality is we don't know our online audience if you're trying to put the same content in print online. The limitless news hole is seldom exploited. A story, which is an excellent story, might have been 600 words, but had to be cut to 300 words to be put into a newspaper. Or maybe there was a video and there was extra footage of other interviews and exciting things that happened, but when it comes to TV news, that piece needs to be 90 seconds. Online, we have the potential to use an entire piece. The 3-minute piece could be 6 minutes. The 300-word piece could be 600 words. But this potential is seldom exploited. What about interactivity? And what about hypertextuality? How many news stories do you read where there are links to previous stories in the story to allow you to search for additional context, to allow you to interrogate the sources of where the story came from? This is seldom exploited. What tends to happen is where content is linked to, the content is linked to often belongs to the same company doing the linking. So News 24 will only link to News 24's website. Times Live will only link to Times Live website. And the Mail and Guardian will only link to Mail and Guardian content. And in the last 3 years, as you might have known, a lot of these websites have shut down on the comment section. So where's the dialogic content? And of course then on websites where sites do enable comments, very often they haven't trained up the journalists to be moderators to appropriately shepherd, seed, and mine user feedback in UGC. In other words, journalists in newsrooms and also journalists at universities are not being trained how to be good moderators of content. To shepherd, in other words, to guide conversations, to seed, in other words, to take a story idea and start dropping information in the comment section to encourage people to comment themselves, and to mine comments. Mine comments means looking through the comments so that if there's an interesting idea or another story angle, we can take them and use them for follow-up. The reality is there's negligible and poor use of multimedia. And where things like video is produced and news video is produced, online newspaper organizations frequently borrow from the medium of TV news and try to produce TV news style videos, which very seldom gain any viewing. Or interactivity and multimedia aren't exploited appropriately. Some journalists in some news organizations are still restricted from using popular social media like YouTube and Facebook. I have to admit that this is an old one, but as far back as 2009, when we visited the Times Live newsroom when it was still in Rosebank, their journalists were not allowed to access YouTube in the newsroom. And social media is used for publishing and not for reporting and engagement. In other words, news organizations still see social media as a tool for talking to the audience instead of sharing with the audience and talking with the audience. So we can see that there is a reality of what online journalism can do, but the reality is that many news organizations, and you can check this out for yourself as you search various websites, see if it's true, many news organizations aren't exploiting that level of interactivity. Must shift from what is known as shovelware. Shovelware is exactly what it sounds like. You take content from one platform and you just flip it, shovel it onto another platform, right? Cutting and pasting and shoveling stories into the CMS, the content management system, without considering how users will use it on another platform. That users in print read differently from users on mobile. That users on web use content differently from users in print. That people who watch TV consume differently from people listening to radio. But what we tend to get between the media is shovelware. And the reason why it's simple, it's quick, it's easy, and it's cheap. But shovelware, which is quick, easy, and cheap, which saves money, unfortunately, does the audience no good, because it means that we have a system that emphasizes shovelware and does not emphasize the unique aspects of online journalism. So we have to move from repurposing. What's repurposing? Repurposing is when you have journalists and sub-editors that can take that existing piece that was written as a script for radio and rewrite it and augment it and improve it with video or a gallery, chunk content up, find additional content, add links, and write in a way that online readers will use. So repurposing reinterprets existing traditional content to exploit its potential for some new platform and its audience. And a lot of news organizations don't really do that. So we've got to move to repurposing. The other thing we can move to is pre-purposing. Pre-purposing is we don't start thinking about moving content in our TV station from our TV bulletin online. We start developing content for online, for web, for the digital platform, even before our deadline for our TV news bulletin. We start publishing our news stories online even before they reach print. And this leads us to the idea of web first, online first, a policy that some organizations are beginning to embrace. And that is that news is no longer broken on a website. News is no longer broken on the traditional media, but the news is broken on the website first. I'm going to skip through the next two slides because they aren't really too important. What is significant to know about the idea of reverse publishing and cross-publishing is just this. That increasingly in the digital age, we shouldn't simply have a situation where content moves from print to online, from TV to online, but increasingly as we go web first, content might move from web to print, from online to radio. And that is known as reverse publishing or cross-publishing. And it's a larger change to the media ecosystem. We also need to acknowledge that when we need to learn to write for online, that we need to write for push, pull, and pass. Now, if our course only wrote for push, then we'd only teach you how to write for newspapers. But we need to teach you to write so that you're able to write so that people share your content on Twitter and on Facebook. I should point out that the latest figures show that Facebook in South Africa, there are 16 million Facebook users. That's the latest figures that were published yesterday on Social SA. Facebook and Twitter drive between 10 to 25% of all traffic on most mature news websites. Actually, forget that. On most mature websites, that figure can be between 40 to 60%. And 60 to 80% of site traffic comes from search engines. In other words, when it comes to online, people don't just come to you and find you by typing your web address. They find your content by using search engines. They find your content by using social media. So we need to know how to write for search, social, and online. How do we write so that users share our content via Delicious or Facebook or Twitter or email or WhatsApp? How do we write so that users click on our stories when they find them using a search engine like Google or Bing? Conversely, how do we write so Google or Bing finds us? We're going to need to write for clarity, precision, and speed with accuracy. And believe me, ladies and gentlemen, this is the big challenge going forward. The accuracy and the verifiability of it very often suffers because we are trying to be first, but we're not always right. So do you want to be right or first? To continue, how do users read the web? Think about how you find content online. Is content pushed to you through things like notifications, in the same way as content was broadcast or published in days of old? No. Very often you pull content because you find stuff that you want through searching for it, or stuff is shared with you. It's being passed. And so we have to take into account how readers online find their content and figure out how we write for how they find their content. These days online, content must find the user, or they must be able to find the content. Social and search probably accounts for well over 80% of all web traffic. Very few people these days bother to type out the URL and go straight to the content themselves. And so, for users to be able to find content, we as journalists have to optimize online content for search. And we have to optimize our content for social. But we also have to take into account one other problem with the person who uses online content, and that they suffer from what is known as partial attention deficit disorder. I want you to take a look at your browser now. How many tabs do you have open? How many other things are you doing? And this is what partial attention deficit disorder is. Whatever device is bleeping right now, whatever tab is blinking, whatever is new and relevant, distracts you, distracts your attention. We have moved into what is known as an attention economy, where attention is scarce, not content. So internet users have partial attention deficit disorder, and knowing this, the question then is, how do you write for people who have PADD? I'll tell you shortly. Some research has also been conducted into the way people read on screen. Jakob Nielsen conducted the Eyetrack 2 research studies. The first Eyetrack looked at how people read newspapers. The second one looked at how people read online. They found that readers read 25% slower online. But more importantly, very often, on average, only 20% of an online story is actually read. So if there's additional facts, if there are more sources, based on the way you structure a story, most people don't finish reading the end of a story. How will that influence how you write your stories and blogs? Also, MIT, the Missouri University of Science and Technology, MIT, has found that it takes 2.5 seconds for people to decide whether they want to read a story or not. How do you sell your story in 2.5 seconds? The research also showed that English readers read from left to right, well, that's standard, and pay 68% more attention to stuff on the left-hand side of the screen. This will inform people if you're designing news websites about where you place stuff. Another important aspect, though, is visual content. If you have a website but you don't have good graphics and pictures and material, it will be very difficult for you to retain audiences. Young audiences in particular are strongly driven by a visual culture, and visuals enhance readability and are processed quicker than text. This doesn't mean that everything needs to be videos and everything needs to be galleries and slideshows, but the graphics do increase comprehension, recollection, and retention. And so that's why it's important to learn how to build things like maps and slideshows and polls and charts that can enable people to understand the content more deeply. What does all this mean? As we've just studied and looked at some of the research on user behavior. What does this mean? We write shorter? Not really. Do we write shorter? Well, it depends on the story itself. Maybe you want to write a long-form story. In some long-form stories, people read it from beginning to end. But it actually depends on what the story is and what you know about your primary user, what you know about the reader. But in general, when we write for online on most online news websites like Eyewitness News or ILL or News24 or Times Live, they write short because news readers do want the information in bite sizes. Some stories might still be 1,000 words, some might be 600, but in the main, they're going to be short. And we have to write for a very important thing. Since it only takes 2.5 seconds for a person to decide whether or not they want to read a story, and because, as Jakob Nielsen found, that people don't actually read text online, because it's 20% more difficult, they scan through text looking for keywords, decide whether or not they want to carry on reading. We've got to write text to be scannable. Headline must be tight and encapsulate what that story is going to be about. It cannot be ambiguous, and it must stand out among all the other headlines that are baying for attention on Google News. And the first paragraphs that are in your newspaper that are fine when a person has some time to read on a taxi or on the toilet or on the couch often need to be rewritten. We refer to those first paragraphs as leads, L-E-D-S, leads. Now, how do we write? You'll recognize that. That's the inverted pyramid. The inverted pyramid is a fairly good structure for introductory journalism, other forms of journalistic storytelling, including the stack of blocks and the champagne glass. But the inverted pyramid works well online because it allows us to get to the important information first. Based on what we know about how people read online, this means that the inverted pyramid is an important structure for structuring your information online. It's not the only structure. It doesn't mean if people structure information in any other form, such as the nut graph, people won't read. But it does mean that it does influence a lot of what structures news stories online. And so let's remind us what the inverted pyramid is. First of all, a headline, 5 to 6 words. This is probably changing. Some people do 6 to 8 words, but the headline needs to be short and say, importantly, why should I be reading this story? What's the angle? Next, a 25 to 35 word lead focused around the angle and a single key idea. If you mess it up with too many ideas, if you have lots of ands, if you are not sure what the story is, then your audience won't be sure what the story is. And what do you do then? Then you start to develop the story based on that single key idea from the most important issues related to that story issue to the least important. Because if most people only read 20%, then the least important issues won't be read at the end of a story. Because as you know, you lazy bastards, some of you will not finish reading to the end of a story. And as I pointed out previously, as journalism students, you're going to have to learn to change up the way you read content. You need to be more informed than the audience, and a different creature when you walk across the stage and graduate. The inverted pyramid also contains key events relating to the story first and background details later. This is important both for when you write and for when you edit. So, how do we write? How do we produce more scannable text? Here's how you can produce more scannable text. First of all, if you're writing, write your lead or intro paragraph. Then go back to it, edit it, cut it down, and edit a lead that doesn't get to the point fast enough. Just remember, it's not just about all the 5 W's and H. That lead has to tease a person into carrying on to read further. It needs to get to the point. And it needs to tell the person the 5th W, which is, why should I give a damn? Then look through your text as well. You might find useless sentences, quotes that don't mean a thing. You might find useless words like modifiers. Modifiers are words that aren't really adjectives or adverbs. They just modify the noun, like really, little, very. What's the difference between very hot or really hot? Those descriptions are imprecise. What about simply saying scorching? Okay, that would be more precise. That would be a better use. So cut out any words that you don't need and use the descriptions that are useful to the reader. Keep your sentences simple. Simple sentence structures typically are subject, verb, object. Avoid writing in the passive tense. Avoid complex, lengthy sentences with multiple conjunctions, twists, turns, and double negatives. Do not. Never and not in the same sentence. The second you start seeing buts and ands in a sentence, see where you can put in a full stop. Read your content, and if you can see that you are writing, write tight, write simple, and stop writing very long sentences. One sentence, one point. If you have lots of complex information, you might want to express them as bullet lists. Here's an example. I'm going to read this out. Tourists from all over the world visit the United States annually. When they come, they usually go to many internationally recognized tourist spots scattered across the country. Some of the most popular places were Times Square, the Las Vegas Strip, the National Mall, Faneuil Island, Marketplace, Disney World, and Disneyland. So that piece, if I am correct, is probably up to about 80 words. If you're going to write tight, we need to write that shorter. How would you write that shorter? Think about it. How would you write that shorter? Got an idea? Bullet points are the way to go. Before and after. So the original was 54 words. Once we've finished editing and thinking about how we write using bullet points, it's only 26 words. And the sentence goes, the most visited tourist destinations in the United States of America are Times Square, Las Vegas Strip, National Mall, etc. And that's only 26 words. People find it easier to read in bullets. That's why websites like BuzzFeed with their stories that say 5 ways to do this, 10 ways to do that, learn how you can do this in 10 easy steps, work really well. They are bullet stories. We even refer to them by the term listicles because they are list-style stories. As I pointed out before, use the active voice. The book was written by Frank. Frank wrote the book. Now that it's in the active voice, what you'll also note is that we've used 2 less words. Let's talk about links. There are different kinds of links in publications, and we need to understand what those different kinds of links are. there's related link context, there's going to be in-text links, there's going to be external links, sometimes they're downloads and sometimes they're embeds. You're going to need to know the difference between all of those. Expect those on some kind of test, but you're going to need to know them so you can apply them, not just so you can tell your friends about them. Links are the currency of the web. Links are really important for search engines. The more links going into a website or web page that a search engine bot finds, the more reliable that content the search engine thinks it is. In other words, you get a higher SEO rating the more people link to your content, because it's assumed that people trust that content. Links, the currency of the web. So there's internal links. This is linking inside the site. So internal links are links, let's say you're on Times Live and you're linking to other stories inside a story, and you're linking to Times Live stories in that article. Those are internal links. You don't have links going external to websites outside of Times Live, like News24 or Polity.govza or Daily Maverick. All the links are internal within that website. Then we get in-text links. Internal links can also be in-text links. But the important thing about an in-text link, when we mention, is in-text links are found inside the text of a post. And the other important things of in-text links is we never link just a single word. We link meaningful phrases. I would not, if in an article, I would never just highlight links in an article. I would highlight in-text links, because that makes it more meaningful in terms of what can be found. Then there's external links. As opposed to internal links, which only link inside. External links link outside of the website. You need to check your company's policy on this. Are you allowed to link to other commercial news providers? Are you allowed to link to commercial companies or NGOs? External links link to sources of content outside the website. But of course, remember, as a journalist, you need to be able to tell and justify to the reader why you are sending them somewhere else. Make sure that you don't send them wrong. Then you get download links, where a person can download additional content or evidence. And you get related links. Related links usually follow at the end of a story. Sometimes journalists are responsible for putting those into the system, and sometimes pieces of technology on websites look at the tags, we'll talk about that later, and automatically add related links. Related links says, do you want to read more on this particular topic? Here's more information. It's like on YouTube when you just finished watching a video and it spits out a whole bunch of related videos, and so you spend an hour watching videos because it keeps on giving you related content. Finally, when you do use links, always go to the websites that you're sending people to and check them out for yourself. Make sure that you direct people to the exact page where the resource is on. Don't send people to a homepage of a newspaper site because there was a story on it. That front page story is going to be gone. It's going to change in 24 hours or even 6 hours or 4 hours. And also make sure that the URL you provide is correct. No one likes clicking on broken URLs. We have very little patience for that, and people will just go away because you're not providing stuff that's useful. And also be careful of where you send viewers. If you are linking to a video and embedding a video, then watch the whole video in case there's material in it that might offend or stuff that your reader might not like. And beware of where you send users. The example I always give my students is in the early days of the internet, an intern at, I think it was the Washington Post, directed their readers to the website of whitehouse.com instead of whitehouse.gov. .gov is the extension for government. .com is just a commercial website. Whitehouse.com was a porn website. So be careful of where you send users. Link love. Avoid in-text links in online articles. It's usually okay with blogs. In-text links distract the user. I should point out that this has changed, and South African websites do use in-text links sometimes, but they don't pepper their posts with in-text links the way that blogs do. Do include related links to similar stories on the same issue by your own title. Check to see whether the content management system of your website allows you to link to other similar stories. So if you're covering a story on robo-journalism, find other stories on automated reporting that you can link to and send people to. But always check the policy of your organization when it comes to using links. Should you be linking content in rival newspapers? Should you be linking to content and documentation from NGOs or government websites? Find out from your organization first. Most organizations tend to only link internally. As I pointed out, this is a limitation. And multimedia and interactivity. As you continue to study in journalism, you'll learn to take photographs, edit those photographs. You'll learn how to shoot video. You'll learn how to produce great audio. You'll learn how to produce things like slideshows. You'll learn how to produce things like infographics. You need to figure out when it's best to use multimedia and interactivity in a story to enhance that story. And remember, enhancing the story potentially means that your reader stays around, or your reader clicks through. Your reader might have additional session time. They might stay around a bit longer. So think of opportunities to increase multimedia and interactivity in your articles. This might be adding on a municipal budget, designing up the municipal budget as an online pie chart with the different segments for the different parts of the budget. It might include a timeline of events, for example, for the Henry van Breda case, that chronicles key moments in that case. It might mean compiling a gallery of photographs instead of using one photograph on a website because people will stay longer. It might include finding or creating a YouTube video or an Instagram video that you put on your website, interview with so-and-so, or even putting a poll at the end of a story, well thought out with a few interesting options. The idea is to use online to boost interactivity. Wow, what a mouthful. So here's the story so far. Online users have attention deficit disorder, well, partial attention deficit disorder. Traditional media underexploit digitality. You have to learn the online writing and editing skills, whatever digital platform you use. And the inverted pyramid is your friend because it allows you to get to the information quicker. Learn to love the link. It is the currency of the internet. Finally, exploit multimediality and interactivity. Let's move on. Let's talk about the first part of the story that you need to write, and that's the headline. As we pointed out, headlines in print are different from headlines on the web. Print headlines are written for the news whole. There's a certain amount of space on the page, and at a certain size you can only fit in a certain number of characters to write that news headline. Print news headlines are not written for online global audiences. Think about it. Most newspapers will be read in a certain area. Daily Dispatch will probably be read mainly in the Eastern Cape. The Daily News will probably only be read in KwaZulu-Natal. The Star will only be read in Gauteng. And you can assume that your readers have certain kinds of knowledge. Online, global, and local audiences don't have that knowledge, and so you have to write headlines that speak to them, not to your local audience that you wrote the print news story for. The function of a headline is to get the next sentence, i.e. the first para, i.e. the lead, read. Headline will also be, might also be all that a user sees on an RSS feed or on Twitter if someone shares a headline On Facebook, if you cut and paste a URL, the headline pops up. Headline and a bit of the first paragraph, right? So if that headline doesn't entice a reader to click through, well, then you've lost the opportunity to get a person to read your story and hopefully say something that is important. Headlines are important. This is a headline from the Evening Herald, which is a UK tabloid. Woman in sumo wrestler said assaulted her ex-girlfriend in gay pub after he waved at man dressed as Snickers bar. What is wrong with that? Well, first of all, it's not really going to fit online in the space on an online page, is it? The second is, it's pretty much given the whole game away. When you write a headline, your headline needs to be succinct. It needs to be short. I've mentioned 5 to 6 words. And when we give you guys tests, we'll have you write them as 5 to 6 words. Active form, strong verbs, and with keywords in the particular headline. The headline must gel with the lead. You can't have a headline saying one thing and a lead saying something else. Very often when we see that, we call that clickbait. Headlines that promise to give you something to read, but then they don't deliver on their promises. You need to be short and direct, not abstract or cryptic. But like a stripper in Mavericks, the headline must not give the whole game away. You're trying to tease a person to continue to read. And please remember, if you have the word "and" in a headline, something is wrong. If you have commas and multiple ideas in a headline, something is wrong. Concentrate on one point in the headline. Just keep on remembering this. One story, one article, one point. One lead, one point, one angle, one idea. One sentence, one point. One paragraph, one main idea. And one headline, one point. You're going to have to learn to write within your content management system word count or character count. If you write too many characters, then it breaks and it looks something ridiculous. Have the most important part of your headline as the subject, and in the main, when you're writing a headline, the most important part of your headline normally are the people involved. Okay, the people involved. Avoid puns online. Don't try to be punny. People's sense of humor varies and they might not always get the joke. For example, the one that I often give is Human's Last Pit, which was about an undertaker called Human, a very famous undertaker in Cape Town called Human, who died, and that was his obituary. It wasn't funny at all. Your headline must be complete, giving the basic story idea, but not give the entire game away. It needs to be written and aligned to what the tone of the story is. So serious headlines, serious stories, humorous headlines, humorous stories. Entertainment headlines can have a degree of whimsy and lightness to it. Capture the tone of the story in the headline and keep your verbs active. When you're looking at your headlines after you've written one, avoid gerunds. Look for words ending in ing in your headlines. Okay? Headlines are words ending in, gerunds are words ending in ing. They derive from verbs but understand it as a noun. For example, learn is a verb. Learning is a noun. Okay? It's not a verb. Don't write headlines in all capital letters. People don't like it and it looks like they're screaming. Try to keep people the topic or subject of your sentence. No punctuation in headlines, please. No full stops. Avoid exclamation marks at all costs. If I see them, I will penalize them. You can use colons. You can use commas. You can use acronyms or synonyms if they're understood. So it's fine in a headline to say ANC. It's fine to say CUSATU. It's fine to say EFF. But what if there is a union called CEPAW, CEPPAW? How many people would know that? Why don't you just simply say Publishing Union instead? In headlines, round off the numbers. You wouldn't write 1035345 million was stolen from the bank. You'd simply say a million. Robbers escape with millions. Headlines need to respond to people emotionally. People respond to emotions, and this will make them stop to read the article. But do be aware that you don't want to be emotive for its. Now, having borne those principles in mind, try to write these as 5 to 6 word headlines from this information. Academy Awards. The star of Ali G, Borat and Bruno, dressed in military regalia from his latest movie, The Dictator, spills Kim Jong-il's ashes on E! Entertainment's Ryan Seacrest. What would it be? Ali G spills Kim Jong-il's ashes on Seacrest? Some people might not know where Ali G is. Some people would not know who Kim Jong-il is. Do you? And some people in South Africa would not know who Ryan Seacrest was. What would you write? Take some time, pause this, and write it down. Here's another one. The spokesperson for the Congress of South African Trade Unions, Patrick Craven, says miners will work to rule in the protest of low wages next month. Congress of South African Trade Unions, what is that? How could that be written? What does work to rule mean? Can we simplify that? Pause, write down your headline, and then continue. United Kingdom's Equality Minister reckons that a new law could permit civil partnerships for homosexual couples soon. What is this story about? United Kingdom Equality Minister, new law, civil partnerships, homosexual couples. Is this about gays being allowed to marry in the United Kingdom? Think about the words. Is a civil partnership a marriage? Pause and write your answer. Here are some ideas for those headlines. Thinking about the subject-verb-object construction, an active voice. Borat actor, because remember it wasn't Borat himself, pranks American Idol Seacrest. We didn't have Kim Jong-il at all, we just are working with the key ideas here. Union, or you could have Kusatu, calls for mine go slow. He doesn't call for a strike. And then here's a quote. Minister, gay couples could tie knot. Note the use of the verb. Note the use of the active voice. Note the use of the person or people at the beginning of each of the sentences. Note that the meaning is concrete. Let's move on to writing leads. The lead is the first sentence or the first paragraph of a magazine or newspaper article. It can summarize the article, set the scene, or establish the mood of a story. But like I said, it needs to provide sufficient detail because on a front page, the need leads to get a person to click the read more link, and on a story page, it actually needs to get the person to read more. Leads must also be written exactly the same as headlines. One lead, one point. Write in the active voice. Include key descriptions. Don't meander. Don't be ambiguous. Don't be obtuse. What is wrong with this lead? Training at the station. First of all, that's a bad headline. We know that because it's got a gerund in it and it's got no verbs. So if I gave that to you, how would you change that? But let's take a look at this lead. No trains have departed from Grahamstown in some months, but there is more going on in the old station building than meets the eye. Before the last coach departed, Grahamstown's former railway station had quietly become the home of an unexpected successful enterprise in recent years. Well, apart from grammatical mistakes, What does that lead actually tell you? And the answer is nothing. The lead tells you absolutely nothing. It's completely ambiguous about what the central point of the story is, as is the headline. We know that it's something to do with training. The actual story, just to tell you, was about a hotel and catering training center for youth that had opened up that was training up young people to be chefs. But nowhere is that mentioned in the headline and in the intro paragraph. So how should we write leads? Leads need to be short, between 25 and 30 words. You know this from writing the inverted pyramid. This means, like good news intros, you need to write it, write your lead, and then come back to it after writing your story and edit it afterwards. Make sure that there's one key point, one key angle, one key idea. Your lead is your main point. Read your story again. Is your lead your main point, or is your main point buried in the story? Is there another potential lead or angle that you could have as your main story idea? Sometimes what you think is the main idea for your story isn't. Think about your lead. Are you using terms and ideas and concepts that a global reader, a person who is reading your stuff in Spain or the Netherlands, or United States or United Kingdom, will they know what you're talking about when you use certain terms? And then challenge every word when you're writing a lead. If it doesn't need to be there, delete it. And you also might want to check the character count in your content management system to avoid broken first paragraphs. This is when leads are cut and paste, and the lead section of your website only accounts for maybe 20 words, and the lead is written at 24, and the sentence has ... and doesn't finish. Chunking. Take a look at that paragraph below. Notice something interesting? That's not how you would see paragraphs in a newspaper. Paragraphs in a newspaper don't have line breaks between paragraphs. But imagine if you tried to read online and the paragraphs were very, very long. Well, we know that it's 20% more difficult to read online. You're just making it more difficult for the reader. So the rule when you're writing online and online news is to chunk your paragraphs. One paragraph, one point. Keep them short. There's no indication as to whether your paragraph needs to be 2 sentences, 3 sentences, 4, 5. But break them down by one core idea. And then, every 5 or 6 paragraphs, throw in a subhead, a 2-word subhead, something that describes what's to come next in the succeeding paragraphs. That's a subhead, the stuff in bold. Big click, compromise, negotiations. This makes it easy for a person to read, and as they scan through, they might decide that they're just about to stop reading, and then they see, ooh, compromise, negotiations, that's interesting, and they carry on reading from that point. Just remember, one paragraph, one point. Break long paragraphs into smaller subunits and ideas, and use subheads as bookmarks and break-in points for the reader every 5 to 6 paragraphs. To produce subheads, think about what the next 5 or 6 paragraphs are about and summarize that in 2 words. Don't give me 3, don't give me 4, don't give me 5, 2 words. An important aspect for chunking is that one paragraph, one idea. Also, one quote, one paragraph. Each quotation also gets its own paragraph. So please, if you're quoting someone, if there's an interview with someone and there's an actual quote, each person quoted will get their own paragraph. Please remember that and use that in your online writing. Alright, so now we've moved from writing our story from the headline into the lead. We've spoken a bit about the body of the story and what we expect to see in the body of the story. We've spoken about links. And now we speak about the last thing you do, which is writing up tags. What are tags? Tags are essentially metadata. Metadata are really important because remember we said that we have to write for search engines. And metadata is important for the bots, these little programs that scour the internet looking for new pieces of content to index in Google. So tags are metadata. You'll notice that there are no hash signs in front of the tags. Hashtags are not keyword tags. So what are tags? Keywords or phrases describing online content, such as an article or wiki, pictures, sound file, video, to search engines. So search engines like Google or Yahoo can find them and say, what is this thing? What is this thing that I'm looking at? What is this story about? What is this video about? What is this piece of sound about? Because remember, if you have something like an audio file, Google doesn't know what's in the audio file. You have to describe it using a headline, give it a nice paragraph, and then also including keywords to describe what is in that video or that audio podcast or in that story. All internet content, from photos to blogs to videos, need to be effectively described using keyword tags. Keyword tags also will provide an alternative way of aggregating and discovering similar content. Some people will look at keyword tags at the bottom of a story and use that to find other content, much in the same way as hashtags are used. Here's how you tag. Meta tags are keywords that describe online content. The more relevant tags are, the greater the possibility of someone finding your content and then using it. Although there are well over 100 other things that play a part in search engine ranking, tags are important, as are links. All content put on the internet must be effectively described using tags. Tags are an important part of your SEO strategy. What's SEO? Search engine optimization. Look it up. Write it down and look it up and see what it involves. Your tags need to speak to the words in your story headline as well as the body of your story, meaning that when you write out your tags, you need to think about what words are used in your headline, and those probably will be repeated in your tags. You need to think about what words are included in the body of your story, particularly the lead, and those will also be included in your tags. Okay? Google wants to see a connection between your headline data, your lead data, and your keyword data. Where it sees massive discrepancies between those because you wrote a bad headline, then your content will be more lowly rated and there's less chances that that content we find when people search for it. Now think about how you type out search queries when you search on Google, when you're looking for content. How do you search? Do you just type out one word, cape, dig, president, Zuma? We don't search using keywords, we use key phrases. That's an important thing to consider when you're trying to work for. Think about how people search. Also think about tags, and this is really important going forward because this is becoming really important in new content management systems. Think about tags in relation to categorizing your story content. So think about the categories. You've just written a story. What category does this story belong to? Does it belong in the politics section? Does it belong in the business section? Does it belong in the religion section? Does it belong in the news section? Does it belong in the entertainment section? Is it advertorial? And add those words to it. Because a person might type out something like CPUT news, not just CPUT. So you need to know what category is associated. So think of the category of the story. Next, think of a subcategory. If it's politics, is it South African politics? Is it KZN politics? Is it gender politics? Is it ANC politics? If it's business, is it a success story? Is it a business advice story? If it's a column or opinion, note it. Next, start to include a tag to describe the kind of story it is. Was it a news story? Was it long-form journalism? Was it a feature? Was it a press release? What is comedy news? So when we start with tags, start thinking about how you categorize a story content, and then start thinking about subcategories and story type. Next, good questions make good tags. So some things to think about in tags that you would type out. Where did the story occur? If you just type out murder, that's not useful. But did the murder occur in Shoshanguve? Did it occur in Greenpoint? And then you can type out words like Greenpoint murder, and that means when someone searches for Greenpoint murder, your story will come up. So remember where your story took place. Not just the city, but the area. What words describe what took place? Crime. What kind of crime? Murder. Robbery. Assault. What took place? Conference. Disaster. Protest. What is the name of the event happening? EFF protest. Who are the main actors involved in the story? Name them. Don't name all of the people in the story, particularly if they're nobodies. Okay? But if the story involves some person who's notable, Thabo Mbeki, Prince Nebattalu Sawa, VC, who's sitting at home, then use them. What organizations or companies were involved in the story? Cape Peninsula University of Technology. What's another way to say Cape Peninsula University of Technology? CPUT. So use both, because someone might type it out in full, or someone might type it out just as a word. What about tagging stuff from the body of the story itself? Think about the story. You've got the story in front of you. Take a highlighter. Take a look at the key words from the story, the key phrases from the story, and highlight those key words and phrases separated by commas. Maybe that might be where the story took place, who was taking part, what the name of the event was. Sometimes even the year that it took place is important. Okay? For example, if your story was about Fees Must Fall, was it Fees Must Fall 2015, 2016, or 2017? Underline all those keywords and then think about which of those keywords you will document as phrases separated by comma. Realize that all that stuff must be in lowercase. In tags, don't use any other punctuation. Don't use apostrophes, don't use full stops, don't use exclamations, don't use short words, don't write the CPUT, this, that, Short words are banned. You'll notice I don't have that in my notes, but short words are banned. Do not use them. Google doesn't see them anyway. Then think of synonyms for popular keywords. Someone's looking for a story. What is a certain something known as? For Michael Jackson, you might type Michael Jackson. Well, Michael Jackson was also known as MJ, so comma MJ. All right. What about Orlando Pirates? Orlando Pirates is also known as Bucks. Pirates Amabaka Baka. So you can include those words as part of your tags, because when people search, they might search using those words. Those words aren't in your story, but they're synonyms based on what people might search for. Next, don't repeat the same word. University, university. Repeat, repeat. Don't repeat the same words in your tags. Don't use capital letters. That's a given. Type everything in lowercase. I will penalize people who don't. Remember, this is 10% of your mark when I'm marking your blogs. Don't use small words like is, of, the, this, that, in tags. Not useful. Do use acronyms and full text. As I pointed out previously, you might type out Cape Peninsula University of Technology, and then you might also do CPUT or COSATU, Congress of the South African Trade Unions, because people might search for both. And then list your keywords and phrases according to their importance. This is one that a lot of people forget, but think about what people would search for first and have those listed first and the least important ones listed last. Finally, think key phrases. Phrases are 2 or 3 words before we get to a verb. Not just single keywords. People search the web using phrases. CPUT shutdown. University protest. Right? Not just university, comma, protest, but university protest. Write your tags in lowercase. I cannot stress this enough. Don't use capital letters. Don't use punctuation marks. Just the commas to separate them. Please spell your tags correctly. Otherwise, I will penalize you for incorrect spelling in headlines, which is unforgivable, and incorrect spelling in tags. And a final point, do not include any opinion words in tags. You could get sued for defamation based on particular opinion words in tags. For example, Pravin Gordhan thief. Now your story might not say that someone said Pravin Gordhan is a thief, but that will show up when a person does any search, and that association means that you've impugned someone's good name. Tag, you're it. How would you tag this story? Think about it. What are the organizations involved? Is where it's taking place important? Who are the characters and people involved? Are there any events involved? What kind of story is it? We know that it's a news story, so we'll start with news, comma. We know that it involves the South African Revenue Service, so we'll write that out in full in lowercase, comma, and then write out SARS, also in lowercase. We know that it involves KPMG, so we'll write out KPMG. And then we've got to decide what the story is about. Is it about KPMG's corruption? If so, write corruption. Is it about other keywords I see? Good governance, unethical conduct. You might add those. We know that the story does involve the SARS rogue unit, so you might include that as part of the story and story links. And there you have it. Watch this video as many times as you want, and please make sure you read the readings that we direct you to. So in short, here's what we know about online writing and production. First thing is that news organizations seldom repurpose content like they should, but they should, and the next generation should acknowledge this, because people don't read online like they do in print, and we need to research our audiences to find out how they use different platforms. Because we know what people read like online, we know that we need to do the following. We write headlines for the web, we write intro paragraphs and leads to tease the reader to reading further, find related content on our own website so people will have more stuff to read when they finish reading our article, if they hit the end. Use in-text links in our story to either internal content that we've written or external content, if your policy allows, to offer context, in other words, background and depth. Avoid linking to rival sites and commercial sites that will be part of your policy. Provide links to helpful external documentation, and then do embed content that enriches your story, that really enriches it, as opposed to I'm just looking for stuff so my story looks pretty. Summarize complex information into bullet points. Paraphrase long quotations. One quote, one paragraph. Provide at least 8 relevant tags, and optimize and promote content on search and social platforms. I hope you found this useful. I hope I don't have to do this fairly often and we can be in class next week. Please remember, if you have any questions, take it to Twitter using the hashtag Journ1. This is Jude Mathurine for the Cape Peninsula University of Technology Journalism program on the 19th of September. Wishing you a good day.